Stephen A., do you feel like this is the end of the Warriors as we know them?
Yes, it has to be. Major props and an incredible level of gratitude needs to be given to them for what they've meant to the game of basketball. Steph Curry is still a superstar, make no mistake about it. Relatively pedestrian performance last night, hit 50% of his shots from the field, went 3 of 7 from three-point range, only finished with 22 points. You were going to need more than that to beat the Sacramento Kings last night. Klay Thompson, obviously, approaching free agency. I think it was, I don't want to call it poetic because I certainly don't want to sit up there and try to imply anything negative of this four-time champion and one of the greatest shooters we have ever seen. But there is no doubt that he has fallen off to some degree. I still think a boatload of teams in the NBA could use his services. He ain't going anywhere. He's not going to retire. But is he what he used to be? The answer to that question is no. When you look at the Golden State Warriors, we have to think from an overview perspective, Wendy and Doggy. This is the third time in 5 years they've missed the playoffs. The third time in 5 years. Now, I know Joe Lacob and Peter Guber a little bit, and I can tell you something about Joe Lacob ain't going to stand still. I can promise you that. I haven't spoken to him in a while, but I'm telling you, I know this man well enough to tell you he is not going to stand still and just let these twilight years of Steph Curry's career fade into oblivion like this. This is the third time in 5 years the Golden State Warriors have missed the playoffs. I understand they got a championship recently, but it's still 3 times in 5 years you've missed the playoffs. And by the way, against the top 6 teams this year, their record is 4-19, if I remember correctly. 4-19. That's unacceptable. That's unacceptable. And so sometimes in life, listen, business will be the first to tell us you got to see the forest from the trees. You got to read the tea leaves. You got to see what's coming down the pike. Well, this has been coming down for quite a long time. You got a guy in Andrew Wiggins that, when he's there and he's vibrant, he can do some big time things. Far more often than not, he's inconsistent or, dare I say, an absolute positive no-show. Family issues and things of that nature, I get it. But at the end of the day, a whole bunch of folks in this country and throughout this world got issues. They still show up to work. Sometimes he does, sometimes he doesn't. And so we look at it from that perspective. We look at it from Klay Thompson's perspective. We look at the youth movement that they have, and you've got some talent. But clearly, when you look at the rest of the West, as Wendy alluded to yesterday, there's a whole bunch of talent throughout the Western Conference. And more competition seems to have elevated to the point where the Golden State Warriors are on the verge of being left behind. Joe Lacob is not going to stand for that. I can promise you that. There's no way that this is going to stand pat. The end of the Warriors as we know it, this isn't the end of the Warriors because they still got Steph Curry. But as we know it, as we see them presently constructed, it's a wrap. Trust me on this. Change is coming.
Yeah, so it's interesting you brought up about how Klay has receded. There's no doubt about that. He wasn't a $43 million max player in terms of production this year, which is why he's going to take a pay cut, probably in Golden State, but maybe elsewhere. What they had done when they won their championship 2 years ago is they'd gotten this incredible rise from Andrew Wiggins. He's receded himself. So the problem here is that even though Steph Curry's still playing at all-NBA level, what you need to compete in the Western Conference, this high level of assistant talent, just isn't there. So if it's not going to improve, I don't think, with Wiggins and Klay. Maybe they can get more back to where they were, but I don't think you can bet on that. So the question really becomes, guys, what does the ownership do? Because one of the things that is an issue here, this is a $400 million team, $380 million when you include the taxes. What Joe Lacob has said on the record is that they need to get under the luxury tax. And not just because they're tired of spending money, although I wouldn't blame them if they were. If they had a team that they spent this much money on that didn't even make the playoffs, I would understand why they wouldn't want to run that back. But doing what they need to do to get under the tax, which is very doable, by the way. You have a non-guaranteed contract on Chris Paul for $31 million. You just say thank you and goodbye. You get Klay Thompson to take a pretty big pay cut. I mean, in all honesty, you should come down at least $20 million-ish. You can negotiate that. But right there, that's $50 million right there. That puts you in a whole different stratosphere, and you open up some other options. But if you're talking about not standing pat, Stephen A., the only way to really bring in major talent with where they're at right now is to keep that Chris Paul contract add the young players that you've got and a couple of future draft picks that you've got and go out into the marketplace star hunting. And I'm just not sure that that's where this team is going to go. I think what they're more likely to do is to say, hey, we finished the season 27-12. When Draymond played this year, we were 33-22. When he didn't play, we were under 500 in those 20 games with the suspension and the return from that. If we get Draymond to not get suspended for 20 games next year, and we, can improve around the edges, we can still be competitive. I think that's more likely as opposed to them going hunting in the market. But I have to acknowledge that that is still possible if they're willing to spend.
Real quick, would you characterize this season as a failure for the Warriors?
I wouldn't. And I know that really fired up Stephen A. and Shannon yesterday. Here's the thing. Let me just ask you this question, really basic. Was this season or last season better for the Warriors?
I didn't hear your question, Wendy, because the producer was in my ear. Could you ask that again, please?
What were the Warriors better this season or last season?
They were better this season, especially on the road.
That's right. They were a better team this season. They won more games despite the Draymond situation than they did last season. Now you would say, well, how could you possibly say that? Because they're home. They didn't even make the playoffs. Last year they made the second round and went out in that tough series against LeBron. But they were a better team this year. They actually were. Their numbers were better. They had more wins. The circumstances with the suspension and the strength of the West pulled them back. But the idea that they're withering, they're withering compared to where they were in 22 when they won. They're withering with where they were in 2018. I'll agree with you there. But this team actually is growing. They had four young guys, 22, 23-year-olds and younger, who played key roles on this team. None of them are going to be Hall of Famers, I don't think. None of them are going to, or Steph. None of them are going to be number 2 on a championship team. Those guys should get better. Like, I know that today it's very comfortable just to say, well, it's over. But this team still has growth potential, just not to where they were in 18.
No. See. That's you being the astute NBA analyst who, by the way, is also an incredibly nice guy, America, an incredibly nice guy. You understand? I'm a little bit more harsh than you. It's about the competition. So I get what you're saying about them, but you can't in the same breath sit on national television like you did yesterday with me and Shannon talking about the parity that exists within the Western Conference. Looking at Phoenix, looking at Dallas, looking at the Clippers, looking at Sacramento. Sacramento's still in the mix. Looking at Minnesota and Oklahoma City along with Denver, and just literally all of a sudden a day later, judge the Golden State Warriors in a vacuum. I know they've gotten better, but in the end, who are you going against and how much better will they get? How much better has the competition gotten? That's where we are with this. And by the way, let me be very clear to the Golden State Warriors. The season's a failure. The season's a failure because you didn't make the postseason. I understand you got better. I understand you look better than you did last year. 46-36, 10 games over 500 ain't nothing to sneeze at. You were considerably better on the road this year than you were last year. I get all of that. You're home when the playoffs begin this weekend. That is the definition of failure in the National Basketball Association for a playoff contender. Now, if you stink and you're you're in purgatory and then you improve, that's different. But when the expectation is postseason and you don't make it, you have failed.
The Warriors are not, that's it. It's over. Curry's old. Thompson's not as good as he was. Green's old. They got no draft capital. They're not going to be able to bring a free agent. You can tell me more about that than I know.
You're right.
So as a result, the OKC's good. Minnesota's not going anywhere. Houston's going to get better. San Antonio eventually will win some games. I mean, you certainly got Denver. I mean, so there's a lot of good teams. So from that standpoint, it's finished for Golden State. They're not winning another NBA. Steph Curry, unless it gets traded, he is not winning another NBA championship in San Francisco and go one step further. He's not playing in a conference final. And he's great. We all know it. It's over. He is not ever going to play again in a conference final in the West. I'll make that point right now.
By the way, you bringing up your scenario for a team that did not make the playoffs. You want me to tell you who's a success story thus far this year?
Who's that?
The Houston Rockets.
I agree with that.
That's a success story,
I
Wendy.
agree.
You
You're
see
right.
on the come
Here's
up
the thing.
where they were to where they are.
What you're
that's
talking about-
successful season.
Stephen A., what you're talking about there is nuance. Because you can look at the Rockets with nuance and understanding and say they did a great job this year. You can look at the Warriors and say they achieved this year, but it didn't work out because of these 4 things. It's not you win the title or you're awful. Sometimes you can have a successful season and things don't go your way. The difference between the number 2 team in the West, which is whoever you want under Denver, and the number 10 team is negligible.
But Wendy,
Anybody in this Western Conference, other than whoever, than the Lakers and Denver,
Wendy,
anybody wins to me. There's no such thing as an upset. Other than the Lakers over Denver, there's no upset. All those teams are the same. And the Warriors this year go out 10th. That's it.
Ever on air, I've never insulted you in all the years I've known you because I love you to death. I've never insulted you one time, Wendy. I'm going to do that right now. You just imitated some damn troll on Twitter. I never said you win the championship or you're a failure. I didn't say that. That's right. You see how you twisted that? I didn't say that.
That's the
Those
way,
words never came out of my mouth.
Modern NBA fandom unfortunately operates all the time.
All right, I'm just saying. But modern day NBA fandom ain't this. They ain't me and you talking on First Take. You understand what I'm saying? This is who we are. I'm saying to you, the Golden State Warriors, the expectation was playoffs. If the expectation is playoffs and you don't make it, you have failed. I didn't say championship. I said if you miss the playoffs and you're the Warriors, you have failed. Now, the reasons why could be the reasons why. You can bring up Draymond. You can bring up Klay. I can bring up Andrew Wiggins. If the man had done something consistently, I think they would have been there. I love Kuminga and Pajinski's growth, no doubt about it. I like Moody a lot. I see the youngs. I see the young dudes. I get it. But the expectation with a superstar who's playing like a superstar is to at least make the playoffs. Not the conference finals, not the finals, not win a championship. Just make the playoffs, especially when you got 10 teams that got a chance because of the play-in, and they didn't do it. Period.
And if Draymond didn't get suspended, they probably do, and they're down 1.
But he always gets suspended.
Okay.
You can't say if he does, and he always does.
Because he's also played great in finals and been a big factor.
I agree with that.
That's the thing.
I agree with
That's
that.
why we go through this whole thing. That's why there's 30 teams, not 2.
Yep.